Audrey Saccone, welcome to the WorkPlay podcast.
Thanks, Lyric. So excited to be here.
I am so excited that you're here. You're one of my really good friends. You're a wealth of knowledge. You've done so many things and you're so smart. So I just knew when you were coming on to the WorkPlay podcast, like we were going to touch on so many cool things that we've never touched on the podcast. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about where we're at in the landscape right now in business, what actually matters, all of that good stuff. But before we hop into everything, who are you? What's your business or businesses? And how long have you been doing all of this?
My name is Audrey Saccone. My flagship business is Audrey Digital. As we were kind of chatting about before we turned the recording on, I have a tendency to create lots of little spin-off brands and try new things. I love to dip my toes in a lot of different waters, so to speak. I've been in the online space for almost 10 years, maybe closer to 8, but we're coming up on it. But I actually first started as an employee, which I feel like is a little unique to some of the entrepreneurs in this space. So I worked in-house for Marie Forleo for 2 years. Then I worked in-house for Sophia Amoruso and helped her launch business class. And since then, I've done a lot of things. I've consulted with other course and membership creators. I've had an agency. I've dabbled in Shopify, but now I'm really coming back full circle and getting back into the expert IP course, membership, podcast, book space.
You've been doing this a long time and you've been in a lot of circles and you've served a lot of people. How did this all come about? What's the origin story here? Because in the grand scheme of things, it's a very niche space that we're in. So how did this all come about for you?
I've been freelancing my entire career. So before I even got into this world, I was in the nonprofit space. I've lived in New York City, ever since I graduated from college. And for those of you who can make some assumptions, nonprofit salaries, while much better in New York City than some other places, still not that much money. So I was always side hustling, working a part-time job, doing other things to make more money because I like to have nice things, as you know. And, I didn't want to just be surviving in New York City. I wanted to really have fun. So the job for Marie actually came up really randomly. I had jury duty one day and was swiping through Instagram stories. I was a casual Marie Forleo follower and she was hiring for an executive assistant. I was 6 years into my career and I knew I wanted to go the COO route and had just read a profile on Kim Kardashian's former EA who became her COO. So I was like, oh, I want to be an EA. Spoiler alert, I did not get that job because they were like, we don't think you'd be a good assistant, which is accurate, but they did bring me into marketing. And that I just kind of fell into this world of I joined, I think a month before a B school launch and just got kind of thrown into it. I was like, what is this place I have found myself in? And it was so cool to see all these entrepreneurs who had really built businesses for themselves on their own terms, out of their own interests. And for me, I didn't really think that was something that I ever wanted to do, which everyone who's known me for a long time thinks is just nuts because I'm very entrepreneurial. But the lack of security and consistency that can come with entrepreneurship, or at least my idea of entrepreneurship at the time, led me to put it off. I was like, I don't want to deal with insurance. I don't want to deal with taxes. All those things that honestly, I still don't like having to deal with, but have now figured out and have made enough money to just pay somebody else to figure out, which I think is more important. So I don't know. I just kind of fell into it. And then after I worked for Sophia, I got her all set up and was like, okay, the setting up part is fun. Doing the same thing launch after launch was a little less exciting for me. So I went off on my own.
That's so interesting that you were attracted to that COO role because I know you to be so good at systems and so good at I coined myself as a very lazy entrepreneur, but I love you because you always find these little shortcuts. And I think that's an amazing quality. And I'm sure that served you so well in all of these spaces. So I want to kind of dive into what you're doing now. You mentioned Audrey Digital is the mothership, and I love how you think about your brands. So I want to go into that. How are you expanding? And when you say mothership, what does that mean from a brand perspective?
Audrey Digital is the brand from which everything flows. It's not the name of my LLC, but has been the public facing name of the business since 2022. And in that time, it's had a couple of different lives. It's been an agency, it's been more of a consultancy, it's just been a few different things. And what I've learned through that is because the business has my name on it, people expect to be getting me. And no matter what I did to try to get myself away from delivery, away from different things, just never happened. So now I think of Audrey Digital as the Audrey piece of it. So it's consulting, it's working with me directly, and anything where I'm less involved. For example, I have an idea of a potential agency that will probably launch either later this year or early next year. That'll be a done for you component of my strategy work, my consultancy, because I've learned from experience that when I consult with people, my consulting engagement always ends with, great, how can we hire you to do it? Which is how my agency started in the first place. Instead, I want an agency that I can hand people off to and say, hey, they work directly in my methodology. I've trained them. If you want to keep working directly with me, you totally can. You can do that through Audrey Digital, but this other entity lives on its own. It's its own thing. It'll have its own CEO. Like, it'll just be its own beast.
That's very, very smart. And I want to kind of touch and piggyback off of the fact that your name being in the brand, it is really hard to separate from who you are and then the actual business. I see a lot of WorkPlay members ask us when they come in, like, do I start to create a brand around me, or do I start to create a brand around a company? Honestly, I always say it comes down to a personal decision, but there are pros and cons when your name is in the company name. People do ask for you. And I've seen people separate it successfully, but it is really hard when clients are like, oh, whoa, wait, this is not what I paid for because it's not you per se. So just to recap, we've got Audrey Digital. You're going into more consulting, and then you're almost like funneling them over to this other agency. Is this the plan, or is the agency up and running right now? And does it have a brand name, and is it different than Audrey Digital?
It has a name, but it hasn't launched yet. So it's staying in my brain at the moment.
Okay, beautiful. I just like to kind of understand the strategy. And that makes sense, right? Because people are coming into you. The thing I'm assuming is high level, like high ticket, and then you're funneling them down into the agency. Is the agency also going to be high ticket?
No, it'll be more mid-ticket, because the goal would be that they'd stay with the agency for a long time. And it's how can it be really supportive to a long-term sustainable growth pattern. I mean, even like my consulting isn't super high ticket, like I think more in the like mid-ticket range. But, my goal is to help them make a lot more money if I'm doing my job correctly, that they funnel up maybe into a higher tier with me, they go into some other services with my partner brands and can kind of go from there.
I love it. Okay, so this is something that not a ton of people are talking about in this space, and it comes to IP. And I think this is a really good starting point to talk about it, because you're branching your brand off into different areas, different sections, even as far as the agency has its own CEO. That's not you, that's not running the day to day. Where does IP come into play, and what even is IP? Because I think this is important that people know this before they start building big empires like this.
So IP is your intellectual property. I am not a lawyer, so I'm not going to give you the lawyer definition, but it's really what has come out of your brain that you have created. So if you're a visual artist, like that might be your actual art. If you're a musician, that's your music. If you work in business and you have really great systems and processes, like that's part of your IP. Like these are all things that you've developed. For me, I really like to think of all of the things that I have as different assets that I might keep all of them. I might sell some of them off one day. And for me, I think about them in terms of audience and asset. For example, I was sharing with you before we hit the record button that I have this like grand master plan of these like 6 different brands over the next few years that will strategically roll out. It's not all happening today, but I have just like all these ideas of different white spaces I see in the market. While some people might say, why isn't that just all under Audrey Digital? Why aren't you just doing that thing together. But to me, they are coming in, they're unique audiences, they have different pain points. There may be some people who can fit into 2 or 3 of those buckets or many different things. But as a marketer, I like to think really specifically about how I'm talking to my ideal customers. And I like to go niche. I don't like to go broad. I know there's a lot more, like the riches are in the niches is, a phrase for a
Yeah.
reason. And, one of the things that I'm playing with, what we have coming out right now is the agency bar, like which has all of these resources for agency owners and small service providers. These are things I've been developing specifically my last 3 years as an agency owner, but really my last 10 plus years as a service provider. I've learned so much and I've really gotten a lot of these systems down, but like, I don't necessarily want to be known as the agency girl, but I have a lot of resources that I've shared and I know have been really helpful to other agency owners and that people ask me for. And why not make those available through their own little hub within the Audrey Digital universe?
I love it. So essentially, you're creating mini brands underneath your mothership brand. I'm assuming the mothership brand is kind of like pushing everything forward because it's you, whereas like everything underneath kind of got to funnel people to where they're going to get the most results within
Yes.
your ecosystem. I think it's super, super smart. So going back to IP and the agency bar, so what is your IP specifically that the agency bar is using and making money off?
All of the systems that I've developed.
Systems and processes are your own IP.
Yes. So starting off with our full proposal system, which I've really refined. And in the past few months, I've actually really gotten good at using ChatGPT to help me churn out my proposals in under an hour. And because I have this like core system already set up and done in place, we do a lot of high ticket. We do custom projects. I've always done custom projects. I don't have like my base. I mean, I don't use HoneyBook anymore, but like I don't have like my HoneyBook project that I just send out over and over again. Like everybody gets their own custom proposal. I like to speak to my client uniquely and I like to have them feel heard. I'm a projector in human design, so I'm really good at reflecting back on people. And that's always been really helpful for me in sales. So I like that to reflect in my proposals as well. And it's been very, very successful for me. So what I've really packaged up is not only these proposals that have helped me close millions of dollars in business with celebrities, influencers, cult brands, but also how now I can turn them same day through using ChatGPT to have them still feel really custom. And I'm saying this as the girl who would put off doing a proposal for days because writing proposals gives me anxiety. So I don't want to do it wrong. I put a lot of pressure on myself and this helps me just get it done. And I wanted to get that out to other people.
See, this is why I love you. You have all of these amazing ways to get from point A to point B very, very quickly. It makes me so happy. And if you guys listening don't know what Audrey's talking about in terms of like projector, generator, go listen to Caitlin's episode. I think it went live 2 weeks ago and we talk all about human design, but you can get some self-awareness around how you like to work. This is all very, very interesting. So essentially, if someone already has IP, how do you go about thinking about packaging this up, branding it, putting it into an ecosystem? Like, what does that whole thing look like?
So in my consultancy, I have this thing called the blueprint, which is what I put all of our clients through. It's our onboarding process. And I really do a super, super deep dive about all sorts of things. Who you are, how you work best, how you communicate with people, and then take a bunch of personality tests. And then we go through what's your work experience or your business experience? What are the things that have been most successful for your clients, for your peers, whomever you worked with, and what's special about what you do or how you communicate it that we can then package up based on how you best work, communicate, all fill in the blocks here. The thing I really come back to and think about it like education systems a lot, and not just the online education system. I think about the collegiate education system, for example, because something I come back to is how are we not going to run out of people to sell to? I have truly been thinking about this for like the 8+ years I've been in this world. And what I always come back to is like, universities enroll students every single year. It's like, well, what brings people to one school over the other? Sometimes it's convenience. Sometimes it's because they've heard about it. At least like for me, because I went to school as a musician, I came up as a musician. A lot of times people are going to school for the person teaching it. 95% of what they're telling you is the same as what everybody else. It's just that 5% that's unique to that teacher. Maybe it's the way they phrase it. I mean, in my school, all music students have to take music theory, right? And there's like 5 music theory professors. Each theory professor teaches it a little bit differently. And some students struggle with one professor, but do so much better with a different professor. Same exact material, same textbooks, like all of it's the same. It's just the delivery, it's your analogies, it's the way you talk about it. So, what is it about you and how you work and how you communicate that's unique? That even if the core concepts are the same, what about it is having you help it click in with other people?
It's so true. And again, if you listen to this podcast regularly, you always hear me say at some point in the episode, self-awareness, self-awareness, self-awareness. It's almost like we don't realize how we like to work or what our magic is or what makes us 5% different, like you're saying. And it really hinders everything that we do in business because we aren't playing in a unique white
Yeah.
space, for example. We're not playing in our own lane. We're looking at other people, seeing what they're doing. We're trying to copy it. There's such a need for people to become self-aware of what their strengths are. So like, oh my gosh, I take them through this personality test. We find this, we do this. We really evaluate yourself there. I honestly think that is the edge when you're looking at huge business owners that maybe you look up to, like Marie Forleo, for example. It's like they're playing in their 5% and they're cutting the rest. And I think what you're doing is so, so smart. And you clearly have been around these types of business owners. You've served them, you've been inside of their businesses, so you get it. When it comes to finding white space in the market, let's say we have our, we've identified what our 5% difference is. How do we know where the white space in the market is and how do we go after it? How do we build our businesses around that?
Part of it's trial and error, and part of it's research, and part of it's also just kind of not giving enough and just going for it anyways. I look at even you, for example, right? I know like you're launching Gloss Up, you have that coming out soon. It's like you're not the first person to do makeup in like major cities. Like there are plenty of other people doing it. It's just like a slightly different positioning of it and slightly different price. Like it's just like, what can you do to stand out even if you are in a crowded market? So I think part of it is, yes, you can go for white space. There may be more opportunity over there, but if you have something that you're just so good at, who cares about the white space? You being really great at it is the white space.
I love that you mentioned like just going for it. Like I call that audacity. A lot of people don't have the audacity just to do it. And I think the kryptonite to audacity is this idea of imposter syndrome and being like, okay, I'm not meant to be in that space. Maybe it's not my skill set, right? I know I had a lot of internal things coming up as we were building Gloss Up where it was like, who am I to be in this space? I've been in this space this whole time. But it's the audacity to actually take the next step. And I think those next steps come in these small micro moments of like, just launch the landing page, just hire the people, put out the ad on LinkedIn, just do the thing, right? And it's like these small little micro moments of audacity help you get there. When we're in this like trial and error, research, audacity space, what can kind of come up for people and how do we get over that? And what might be some roadblocks that they see when it comes to packaging up their IP, playing in the white space, identifying their strengths? Do you see any kind of like roadblocks or bridges people have to cross in order to get to the other side?
I think a really common challenge is listening to other people too much. I think there is value in listening to other people and getting opinions. For example, I've been really redeveloping this consultancy on the expert and IP side. I really am trying to go after some corporate folks because I think there is a lot of opportunity in white space there. So I've been talking to a lot of different people, and it's so easy to be like, well, so and so said this, so I'm just going to do this. Oh, wait, this other person said this. I'm just going to take it this way. So you have to be really clear in your convictions and coming back to what your why is, especially if you're new at this. And part of this is imposter syndrome, part of this is lack of experience. There's a lot of factors that go into it. It's really easy to get off course. So I just think it's really important to just have a list and paste it up on your wall of these are the 5 things that I always come back to. This is my why. And anytime something takes you out of that, I challenge it. Maybe there is a reason, and I'm not saying never deviate from the plan. I've had a lot of success deviating from the plan, but make sure you're doing that with intentionality so that you don't find yourself in 3, 5, 10 years with something that you don't like.
I agree. And it's almost like what you're talking about is have a stake in the ground, have a position when it comes to what you're doing. So you have some conviction in what you are doing, right? This idea just popped into my head as you were speaking, this idea of like intuitive versus anxiety when you're making decisions. It sounds like you have to really be intuitive in your business when these things come up, because it's like, okay, do I just not want to do this because I'm tired today? Or do I just not want to do this because this is not the right path for me? How do you decipher as you're building all of these, as you're building this empire out, what is the right path versus not for your own system? Like, how do you know when it is the right step versus, okay, it's just like, I don't want to do this today, or I don't feel like doing it?
Well, I think mood really plays a lot into it, but I also think there's that self-awareness piece that you talked about as well. Like never making a decision when you're upset, when you're stressed, when you're anxious. It's like the TV show when it's doing well. Don't end the TV show when it starts to fall, because then it's just like, oh, I guess this is done. End it on your terms. One thing I love to have, and I know I just said be careful who you listen to, but do have a good trusted board of people that you have to speak to. This could be friends, this could be family members, it could be entrepreneurs. Like I have a few people, like you're one of them, that I like pretty consistently like bounce ideas off of, I'll share new things with, and it's really helpful. Actually, a very good friend of mine last week, she let go of an employee of hers that she'd had for a while, and we were talking about it, and she was like, I don't know. And I said, I'm just going to be honest with you. You've brought this up a few times over the years. It's not even like this is a new thing. Like sometimes things are good. And I'm like, listen, and I've done the same thing. Like I've had team members I've let go where things are good and then they get bad and then they get good. And it's like having somebody who's objective and outside to remind you of your history and like what you've talked about and how you felt about things is just helpful, because it's so easy to get in your own head and you get so close to things. So have that board to be like, for me, like, Audrey, you got back into this to help people create these legacy products, legacy IP. I'm being really careful about getting back into the celebrity space. It was a really fun place to play. It was really stressful for me. I like those personalities, but it was really draining. So when I had somebody come back to me and say, hey, you should go talk to agents, that could be a really great feeder for you. Initially, I was like, oh my God, that's a great idea. And then I thought about it and was like, no, that's not the audience that I want to target. Even though that could be like easy business, it's not the business I want. If it's not your gut, who in your life can be that gut check for you?
Almost like reflector or some sort of mirror for you to see yourself and what you've done over the years or what you're currently doing. And honestly, I feel the same way about you, which is why I think you going into this consulting, building the brand in this way is so smart, because you've always been so objective in terms of the business side of things. And I really, really appreciate that about you. I want to go into this idea of legacy IP. What does that mean? Why does it matter? How do we go? How do we start? How do we think about it?
So your legacy IP is your IP that lives beyond you. And when I say beyond you, I don't mean that it doesn't have your name attached to it. I just mean it lives beyond you doing work with people, maybe after you've retired, maybe after you've passed, which is many, many decades from now for both of us. It's the thing that outlived you in whatever way. Something that I have been referencing a lot when I talk to people is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
It's like one of those things where it's like everyone talks about it and then I don't want to read it.
Like Blinkist it and get it in like 30 minutes and just be done. And then you can like talk about it,
I know. Everyone like referenced the book and I'm like, I feel left out, but then I don't want to pick it up because everyone's read it.
But that point exactly is like, that is legacy IP. People who like don't even know about his teachings and like what he did, which this like ties into it, but he did all these other things. He wrote other books, but this is the one thing that has stuck with people and like is literally paying dividends to his estate many, many years later. But it's the thing that he has. Just like staying on the book train, for example, you can so easily buy a book for somebody and, you know, they've maybe never heard the author, they've never heard of the concept, but it can have positive impact on them. And it's a way to get you out there beyond like one-to-one or whatever your work is, or like literally meeting people. It's the reason why a lot of us have podcasts. It's so that we can get our message, our story, our concepts out to a broader audience beyond marketing, beyond other work that we do together. So what is your thing that you want to put out into the world? And it could be a book, it could be a course, it could be a podcast, it can be a digital product. Your IP can be so many things, and it could be tied to you as a person, it could be tied to your business, it could be completely separate. But what's your stamp you want to put out onto the world that lasts beyond you?
And it almost feels like, what is the concept? What's your unique edge that you're looking through the world in, if that makes sense? Or what's your unique
Yes.
lens, it sounds like. So I'm assuming when you're working with your clients, you're finding their legacy IP.
Yes.
And packaging it up and
Yeah.
letting it go into the world. So it might sound redundant, but I want to make sure people get it, because I think the word IP just gets, it's like floating and it's like, what it actually does that mean? So do you have an example of, like, besides your own example of legacy IP in a different market or a different industry that we could kind of grasp this concept through?
Staying a little bit more in the online education space and like coming from my history, I mean, like Marie Forleo's B School is a great example. Like she's had B School for 15 years now and she updates it. It's still out there. It gets sold every single year, but that is something that she's known for. Same with her book. You know, she has her book, she has Everything is Figure Outable. It's like a different piece. Like that being a book and that being a number one bestseller as it was will probably be a little bit more of a legacy builder for her. It also has the catchphrase. So that catchphrase is something that like people put it on mugs, they put it on notebooks, like take it from another former employee of mine, Sophia Amoruso, coined girl boss. People say girl boss without having any idea. I mean, I know she didn't like invent the phrase girl boss, but she really made it come into the zeitgeist in the way that it did and just like explode. And it's funny when people who are outside of this world, I'm like, oh yeah, I worked for the person who wrote girl boss. And they're like, oh, I know what that is. So they don't know Nasty Gal, which was her first business. They don't know her name, but they know Girl Boss. Like that is IP that stands beyond you. That's building a brand that goes beyond you. So what is that for you? And not everybody's going to have that. I'm not saying you come to me and like, I'm going to give you the next Girl Boss. I'm not saying that at all. That's really, really hard. I mean, Sophia's brilliant. For her, it was the right thing at the right time, coming at the right moment that it just like took off. If that came out maybe 10 years earlier, it may not have had the same impact. But that came out when social media was really taking off. People were feeling really stuck in their jobs. They really wanted, it was such a rags to riches story, which is why finding and living in the white space can be very valuable and be successful for you. But going back to Marie and Everything is Figure Outable, like that's still something that will resonate with people for years and years and years. Like it is a timeless mantra. So what is that for you? Also, not everybody needs or wants to have a number one New York Times bestseller. For some people, reaching an additional 5,000 people over their lifetime, like that is a massive impact. And that is a massive impact. 5,000 people is a lot of people. So no matter how big or small or medium your ambitions are, we can make that work for you and get your ideas out there to have impact.
I love it because it's almost like we're taking this idea of branding to the next level. More impact, not just, okay, how does it look, but how is it impacting? And it sounds to me, you have to really understand the culture that you're living in, right? At the time that you're living, that when you're creating this IP, it's got to be timeless. It can't be something that's trendy. In the online space, a lot of people launching different things all the time and branding them differently identity, and it starts to become like, okay, what is the actual brand ethos of this
Yeah.
company? And it becomes confusing almost. Now that I kind of reflect on some of WorkPlay's biggest members, they will launch that same program over
Over
and
and over and
over and
over
over
again.
again because they're
Mhm.
known for it. It's almost like this idea of simplicity. Everything becomes more clear and everything
Yeah.
becomes easier. Just tying in the WorkPlay method here, it becomes easier to start creating visuals around your one message, your one thing. You start to get
Yes.
creative within that, which draws people in even more. So, just to kind of round out this conversation, where do visuals play a part in creating this IP for your business, and how can members optimize the WorkPlay method while creating their IP and building it out?
Listen, people buy from people at the end of the day, and having a visual that people can connect with just makes what you're doing even stronger and even more compelling. You know, you can tell a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? You can tell a beautiful story with visuals that people can really relate to. So whether you are going aspirational and you're showing the life you've created and or the lifestyle you've created and what you're teaching helps people get that, like that's a really great way to do it. Or if you want to show who you are in the everyday. There are so many stories you can tell with visuals that you can connect with words, and you can connect to your IP and just create like a full, well-rounded brand out of it.
Yes. And something that I actually wrote down as you were talking about B School and Girl Boss was recognizable. This IP is recognizable. And just to piggyback off of the visuals, it's like the visuals make you recognizable. It's like all
Yes.
of these platforms are so visual inherently. And when someone can recognize you and your IP at the same time, I feel like you've got a good portion of the formula figured out.
What are the things that make you you, and how can you really dig deeper into that? I'm really known for my martinis, for example. Like people send me martini content like 2 to 3 times a week. Was that you who just messaged me and was like, I think I like martinis now? Was that you?
Yeah. Oh my God. I had my first martini in Miami last weekend. I was like, oh, they're not that bad. They're actually kind
Oh,
of good.
people ask me for recommendations on how to order them. My friend sent me the Anthropology has this new olive tray that she sent me the other day that's like stunning. That's just part of my story. Like I love to work at the bar. That's just something I love, to bring my notebook and brainstorm with my martini. That's part of me. And like we work that into my visual brand. So like what are those things that are part of your story that you can make part of your visuals, that you can make connective for people to bring back and talk to you about?
I think that's really smart. Super, super smart. And I think that everyone has something about them that they really love. Like you said, in their routine that just makes them them. It's almost
Mhm.
like, what do your friends know you for? Or like, how do they perceive you? And that's probably what you should amplify, right? Because you would
Yes.
want to have more of those friends, more of those types of people in your community. It's like, what makes you lovable to
Mhm.
your crew, to your community? I love it. And that's such a simple way to incorporate into your visual brand that allows
Yes.
you to be that type of recognizable.
I think too, just to that point as well, like people overthink their
Yeah.
visual brand so much. There's a lot of leopard print in my brand. You'll see it all over, whether it's my personal brand, whether it's Audrey Digital. And the reason why is I got inspiration from my home and my wardrobe when we did my branding. And I noticed I had a leopard print carpet in my office. I had a leopard print pillow in my bedroom. Got like 4 leopard print dresses, 2 leopard print shirt. Literally, leopard was everywhere. And I was like, you know what? I seem to really like leopard print and I seem to be drawn to this. So maybe we just bring it in, and it's just become a part of like I've got the leopard print mug in my office. It's on my business cards. You can't really see, but it's in the wallpaper behind me. Like it's a thing that's I have taken as mine. And I know other people, I'm not like the first or the last person to use leopard print, but it's something that people associate with me now. I love that.
It's like finding what people associate with you. And it goes back to this idea of self awareness. Like, just become aware of what you like, what you do, who you are. And you're able to think through these concepts so much easier. Like, whenever anyone's like, I have zero idea on my visual
Yes.
brand. And I'm like, how is that possible? It sounds like we need to dig even deeper into who you
Mhm.
are and you get clear on who you are, because once you're so clear, you can have so many jumping points off of, who you hire, how you work with those people, how you work with creatives. All of these things have massive impacts when you know who you are, which it sounds like
Yes.
that's the first thing you figure out when you're creating IP in general. So it all kind of
Yes.
mixes in together. Audrey, this was so much fun. Thank you, friend, for
Oh,
coming
thank
on.
you. I know we probably talked for like 3 more hours.
Literally, I know. I want to make sure that everyone knows how to find you, where to find you, how can they get consulting with you and build out their legacy IP.
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. My personal Instagram is Audrey Saccone, and the business is Audrey Digital. And you can go visit us at audreydigital.com and just DM me, email me, and happy to chat.
I love it. And we'll also include everything in the show notes, of course. And thank you so much.
Thank you.